These are black mushrooms growing out of the top of the window right up by the ceiling. They are the most disgusting things you've ever seen in your life on the inside of a building.
I'm Tom Kitchen, and I'm at Somerville School in East Auckland. It's a special school for students who have serious disabilities. And you might not believe it listening to that, but it's still open. In fact, that's where staff ate their lunch until last week when the ministry closed the room. Somerville's children are being asked to learn in a place where mould is entrapped in the walls, floors are rippled from dampness, ceilings are brown from leaks, and this was all supposed to be fixed in a rebuild that was promised years ago.
We might be a specialist school, but we don't feel special, we feel ignored.
This kind of thing is happening everywhere around the country.
20 schools have had big major projects to add or renew classrooms put in limbo amid cost blowouts. The Education Ministry's confirmed to RNZ it's paused the building or redevelopment of 115 classrooms, 2 teaching blocks and 2 gyms, from Northland to Invercargill.
This puts in doubt the equivalent of well over a third of the 300 new classrooms for 6,000 children promised in last year's budget.
It blames rising costs, changing role growth forecasts or reprioritisation.
In Marlborough, a merger of colleges has failed in a year-long attempt to bring the project cost in under $170 million.
Invercargill's James Hargest College, which needs 14 new classrooms, says it makes no sense when its design is ready down to the last light switch.
The government's launching an inquiry. Education Minister Erica Stanford says they've found much of the planned work to improve school property was unrealistic and unaffordable.
It's not unusual to have isolated examples of projects that experience delivery challenges, but this is of an unprecedented scale. Labor have left a pattern of systemic and embedded challenges that cannot continue. It is very clear to me that the current approach to delivering classrooms and school buildings is not working, and a change in approach is needed. We are faced with challenges that include not just rising costs, but also overly ambitious and bespoke designs that take way too long to deliver. When you add into this mix poor communication with schools and a slow uptake of standardised, repeatable building solutions, what we have is a mess.
But so many schools are struggling and angry.
We're living in a really uncertain world.
If something doesn't change, we are going to be in a crisis.
And that's what our Prime Minister is calling it.
Quite frankly, our government has inherited a school property system that I think is bordering on a crisis.
But former Education Minister Jan Tinetti says that's just not the case.
We've got projects that are in the middle of their builds right now that are being stopped. Those projects were funded. You do not start a build without that project being funded. We had the money there. Those projects would happen if National found the funding. That's the issue, is that they're not prepared to commit to the funding. National are manufacturing a crisis here that doesn't exist.
Who's right? Are our school properties in dire straits, and is there really no money to fix them? Later, we'll talk to Newsroom Pro Managing Editor Jonathan Milne about the politics of this. But for now, let's meet Somerville School Principal Belinda Johnston and Deputy Principal Corey Busfield.
Well, we're actually just going to go and pick up Corey, our Deputy Principal, and then we're going to try and head out to some rooms and we'll show you a bit of what's going on in terms of mould and things that are just falling apart and crumbling around us.
Yeah, let's do that.
You went on the tour with the mould inspector.
Yes.
And you might have more information than I do about where the worst spots are.
That's right. Somerville got a mould inspector to come and have a look.
So we're about to walk into a room which was traditionally used as an outside area for some sensory deregulation for our students, but also doubled up as our music therapy space. And at the beginning of this year, we realised that mould that we'd found in there previously that we had fixed, bleached, sanded and prepped the wall and repainted and got it ready. The mould is now back significantly, and we'll describe it in a moment. So.
Take a big whiff. That is not a good smell. That smells like a lot of mould, that's all I can say.
Significant amount of mould, and I find myself, my chest gets quite tight once I've been in here for a little while.
It's been too long in here.
Yes, no, so just under the window, the mould has actually started eating into the plaster, and that's deteriorated the plaster and it's caking away. There's lots of black mould running down from the window sills. It's actually on both sides as well. So as a result of that and the smell and your reaction says it all, so we can no longer use this space to do any music therapy. We've just shut it down for the moment.
Yeah, wouldn't want to use the space at all.
Sort this. That's correct. Yeah. So this is now just locked up. And as you can see, there's still 2 drum kits in here that we haven't managed to find a space for. So that's where we're actively now trying to find a space for the music therapy to go ahead with so kids don't miss out.
Shall we have a little look maybe under this window?
So I'll move that blind out of the way.
Ooh, so what we're looking at are just big black spots of mould on the white wall.
Well, you can see that the paint has clearly been has come off, and it's affected the paper on the plaster as well on the jib board, and it's eating this area here is caved, is pitted, and you can actually see the composite underneath the paper in the jib. So it's eating into the jib.
How has this happened?
Well, this will be from excessive runoff from poor construction design overhead. We're underneath some stairs from above, and obviously the flashings or perhaps the joinery of where they've joined it. I'm not 100% sure on that construction, but it's clearly a problem. I'm going to need to move out of this room because I can feel it heavy on my chest.
I think we will. Yeah. Not pretty. Thank you. I wouldn't want to go in there again.
What it is, I don't get asthma normally, but it feels really heavy and on my chest now, and it will feel like this for the next 20 minutes or so.
Awful.
Yeah.
Awful.
Shall we go to the hall now and we can show you where we're infested with asbestos?
Okay. Is it safe to go in there?
Well, there's some tape over the holes, so supposedly the asbestos won't fall on us.
Okay. Goodness me.
So we're walking into our hall space, which is your traditional New Zealand intermediate and high school hall. These were built in the 50s. There was some leaks in the roof, so one of our projects was to get it re-roofed over the holidays. Now they've done half of the job and then started finding asbestos sheeting up in the apex. So they have stopped work altogether. And if you look up at the apex at the top, there are holes for ventilation. Normally they've now taped those up for safety, just in case any asbestos fibres were to float down and be in here. So they have made the space safe to use, but the roof is only half done, and of course it'll now be a much bigger job to get asbestos removal in, and we'll have to wait for that to happen over holidays because it can't happen while our students are in class.
Yeah. Let's go.
You can see the mushrooms, they're still there.
You say that with such excitement. Ooh.
And this is where our staff eat their lunch in here. This is a break room for the staff that work in those classrooms. So they eat food in here with that.
So that's some box just underneath.
Yeah. Belinda, Corey, describe for me what we're seeing here.
These are black mushrooms growing out of the top of the window right up by the ceiling. They are the most disgusting things you've ever seen in your life on the inside of a building. And there's a musty, horrible smell in here as well. It's not as strong as that other room, but it's not pleasant.
Vile.
Yeah, it was certainly a surprise to us because in the past we know that this has had some water ingress from big storms and stuff, but once again we've gone about trying to patch and fix that, but clearly there's still a huge amount of moisture inside either the wall spaces or those window joinery because we've got these clusters and little forests of mushrooms growing up out there that have dried with the heat of the summer, but clearly they weren't there at the big end of last year. Our next space is just a bit of a walk away.
So we're just heading over to 2 classrooms. Is this where we're going, Corey, where there was a plumbing problem? Are we going there? Or?
Yes, yep. So we'll start up here. So just before school started, our cleaners came in the weekend before just to make sure everything was as clean as could be, and they discovered there was a plumbing leak problem which had flooded out. The water was just pouring out of the pipes. And due to the design of the building, as you can see, we're in the old sort of portable cabins now that they've just joined together. Due to the design, there was poor drainage, and the floor is so uneven that it just pulled swimming pools basically in the classrooms.
Oh,
I'll just take this in now.
They took 10 days to dry out, even with all the heaters and fans and things that the professionals brought in to dry it out.
Yeah.
It's still not open.
You can probably smell that mustiness sort of underlying sort of dampness and mould in here still, even though it has been dried, but there's been damage. So the water was pouring out of the laundry area just here, and we're looking at a floor space which comes past bathrooms and a laundry area onto lino, but because there's no suitable drainage installed here when it was created, it's just run straight off the lino, puddled in here and then run through to 2 classrooms, and it just was pouring water sideways through this space.
Probably for a few days.
Yeah.
It was found.
Yeah, well, that's right, because it was summer holidays and I was here.
Yeah, I came in the next morning and this was literally a swimming pool. Came into the classroom where we're going now. It was just puddled in here. We're now looking at a classroom where the carpet is clearly bunched and rippled. Stainage has come up because, of course, when something's sitting in water, all of the old, and this is older carpet, of course, but any old skin cells or any sort of mites and stuff that are in the carpets we've discovered, this is kind of gross as well, they all rise to the surface. And so what you've got is stuff that the vacuums haven't picked up over the last 10 years.
And we just had the carpets shampooed in January. We do the whole school every January, but still there clearly is just years worth of stuff underneath.
Yeah, and that all floated to the surface on a hot day and sat in water for a bit. So that's why there's a real funky smell in here. So
we're still waiting for the insurance claim and all the assessments and everything. Okay, someone coming tomorrow. Yeah. So we don't yet know when the remedial work will be done and when we can reopen these classes.
After the tour, I sat down in Belinda's office with her and Corey to talk about how things got this bad.
We're a specialist school, which means that all of our learners have intellectual disabilities, and they might have other physical disabilities as well, medical conditions. Our learners are aged from 5 to 21 years. We're based in Panmure, but we have satellite classes in 13 other schools, mainstream schools, and we have a community program in Highland Park.
So it's all around Auckland?
Yeah, our catchment area goes from Maraetai to the Oraki Basin, so it's a really long, big area of Auckland, and we're the largest specialist school in New Zealand at the moment.
And you have how many students?
357.
So now we want to talk about the 20 years of, say, broken promises. Where do we start?
Well, we've got families who came to the school more than 16 years ago with their child and were told by the previous principal, Diane Hankins, that don't worry about the crumbling buildings because the Ministry of Education has promised us a brand new school.
I started at the school in 2005, and when I came along, there were plans had already been drawn up. We weren't on this current site at the moment. We were only in our original base school, and there was plans that had been drawn up to detailed design, I believe, and we were expecting a rebuild of significant parts of the school at that time, and then it just didn't happen. And I know over the years, so I've been here 20 years, there's been this wave of promises and then no communication, or they've pulled the project as things have changed. Now, we've grown so significantly over that time, and clearly unexpectedly, because there doesn't seem to have been a clear strategy to enable us to grow, that when our neighbouring school, Tamaki Intermediate, closed down, we just naturally came across into this school. There wasn't even a planned sort of migration either. So we're now across both sites, and I think over that time they've realised the difficulties in this building, which is not built for the students that we have. Even with those difficulties, that's when they started talking about giving us a new school. And there was a lot of talk, and then in 2018 they finally Treasury announced that they'd put some money aside, and 6 years ago we started doing planning for this, and I've been involved in that planning cycle for 6 whole years. And it was all taken very seriously, and we even had a trip to Australia to look at some of the newest special schools in the region that had been built, so we could see what worked and what didn't work. There was a genuineness to try and see how we could do better for these students through our buildings to enable us to give better opportunities. And it was a great trip, and there was a lot of talk about changing policy of what specialist schools deserve to be able to do their job best for our students. Our first couple of designs went off to be reviewed by what's called the Design and Review Panel at the Ministry, and it came back saying no, they weren't happy with it for their various reasons. So there was a lot of backwards and forwards, and then we got a new project manager who was promising that it would be built within a year, and then Then we had radio silence. All of a sudden, there was no communications at all from the ministry for almost 12 months, was it?
Yeah, so I started around that time. I started at the beginning of 2020. We had one meeting about the rebuild, and then there was nothing. So COVID was in there, but it went way past COVID and through to the next year until I eventually sort of wrote an email saying what's going on. And then we had a few more meetings, and then the delivery manager changed again, and then there was another delay of a year, and then
the delivery manager changed again.
And the delivery manager changed again. And every time, we laugh about it, but every time your delivery manager changes or another member on the team, you go back to scratch because they don't know special education and they don't understand why this rebuild is so different from all of the other schools they've ever worked on.
Yeah.
So then you have to show them around the school and show them the sorts of learners that we've got and talk about the types of things that we need to help our learners. And so it's all so time consuming, and then they leave and you get the next person.
So we're up to 2024 now, and on the 19th of February, your board chair wrote a letter to the Secretary of Education, Iona Halstead. What was in that letter?
Right, well, the purpose of that letter was to explain how disappointed we were that our project to rebuild our school appeared to be on hold, but nobody was communicating with us.
And how long have you not had communication for?
Well, I had heard from our delivery manager not long before we sent that letter to say that there were some delays. We were on pause, not on hold, and that they were reviewing the plans to see if there were ways that they could reduce costs, and the possibility of reducing classroom spaces and the outdoor spaces was mentioned, as a possibility. And my understanding was that this process had been going on for a while. So it became apparent that something big was going on, but we weren't being told all the information.
In actual fact, the school rebuild was on hold, even though the Education Ministry denies that, saying the design was being refined. As a result, Somerville then closed its growing role. The schools told the ministry about the waterfalls in the classrooms, sewage bubbling out of the floors, mould, rotting playgrounds, and what it calls prison-like outdoor spaces.
We've been holding off, saving every penny we can so that we can create amazing spaces in our new school rebuild. And in the meantime, we can't justify spending money on a school that's going to be demolished.
Since we met, Belinda's had a meeting with the Education Ministry. Many of the mouldy rooms have been closed off now. At the end of the month, there'll be another meeting. Newsroom Pro Managing Editor Jonathan Milne has been writing about this issue.
I've been covering education and infrastructure issues reasonably intensively for the last few years. The education sector is pretty familiar to me. I used to work at the Times Educational Supplement in the UK. What I've seen in both the UK and in New Zealand is it's getting ever more difficult for teachers and school management to keep their heads above water.
Yesterday when I went to Somerville School, I was absolutely flabbergasted. The state of that school, the mould, the leaks. I can't believe you can have a school like that. And that's certainly not the only school like that in New Zealand. What's the state of the schools at the moment?
Yeah, and I think what you're going to see is that particularly in smaller schools and more remote schools, they do tend to fly under the radar a little bit, and they can really struggle to get their voices heard when they need infrastructure projects. And the Ministry of Education does have an enormous team focused on school buildings. The Ministry of Education runs the building projects, it funds the building projects. The boards of trustees at the schools don't control the projects themselves. So it is all done out of the ministry. But what I hear from a lot of schools is it can be made very difficult to get their voices heard. It really helps to have a principal and an experienced board at, when some of the bigger and, dare I say it, more affluent schools who know how to grease the wheel and make sure that they get attention.
So this news has all come to a head as the government's announced an inquiry into school property. You've spoken to a few schools around the country about the problems that they're facing. What schools have you spoken to? What have they told you?
Yeah, I've been chatting to schools over the last few years, big and small. Northcote College in Auckland is a pretty decent-sized school. They got their project mostly underway last year and chunks of it completed. They had new classroom block, but part of the plan was a new gymnasium. Their old one is no longer fit for purpose. And that's just fallen off the books across a lot of schools over the last few years. There were reasons for that. There were changes to projects. There were changes to the scale of projects. A lot of that was driven by the construction inflation, which has been extraordinary at times. Civil works construction, which is pretty much what we're talking about here, has hit 18% at one point a year and a half ago. Now, it's right back down again now at far more manageable levels, but that's really stymied the Ministry of Education in trying to stay within their budgets. I talked to Rick Hurd, who finishes up this month as Chief Executive of Naylor Love, one of the big construction firms. They do a lot of school projects. They were doing Northcote. He was saying wherever they were working on a project, the ministry was having to come back to them and get them to slash 25% of the work in order to stay within budget. And that meant libraries, gymnasiums, whatever, they were just falling by the wayside. All the nice-to-haves were gone.
Naylor Love was also involved in the Marlborough College's relocation project, which has now been stopped. The new Education Minister says the cost has blown out from 170 to 400 million and has pulled the plug.
Naylor Love talked to me about a number of the projects they were working on, and again, it was the same thing. They were being told they had to cut costs, they had to trim the actual scale of the project because it couldn't be afforded within the existing budgets that had been provided by the ministry.
Don Buck School as well?
Yeah, Don Buck School. This is a pretty gutting story because I talked to Sandy Sterling, their principal there. It's a small school. When Sandy Sterling started there a couple of years, there were fewer than 200 kids. It's a school that comes from a pretty low socioeconomic community. It's got a lot of challenges. I said to him, you can't go out and charge, $500,000 school fees like so-called donations like some state schools do. He just laughed. He said, we can't ask for any contribution from our community. They've got no spare cash. They're struggling to put food in their kids' mouths. But Don Buck School is sadly dilapidated. It's really run down. And they've been promised for the last 2-3 years this new build. And then November last year, Sandy got the call, it's not going to happen. It had been delayed and delayed for a year and a half, and then, no, it's not going to happen at all. He had to go back to his community and break the news to them, and the community, he tells me, is just gutted at the loss of that.
It's awful. Yeah, so they were on a list of 20 schools where the project's been put on hold or delayed. What's that list about?
Yeah, so as best I can work it out, these stoppages, these work stoppages are not politically driven. They're not coming out of the Beehive and America Stanford's office. They were put on hold, perhaps by the Ministry of Education, perhaps anticipating that the government was going to be looking for cost cuts. So like a lot of government agencies, I think they took the initiative and started trimming before they were forced to. So there's something like 350 schools that Erica Stanford says the costs have blown out on. So these are the first 20 that the ministry had decided were unsustainable and they couldn't continue with their projects in the foreseeable future. There will be more. There's going to be more. And as Erica Stanford conducts and her officials conduct the review, there will be more schools where they say we can't manage these construction costs. They've just got beyond a joke.
But Labour and Jan Tinetti, Chris Hipkins, they just say National's manufacturing crisis. Do you agree
I don't
with that?
accept that. I've been reporting on this problem for a couple of years now. It's been a mounting problem. It's not just education. It's not just schools. We see the same thing happening in the health sector with hospital builds. Construction inflation has just been completely unmanageable and budgets being blown left, right and centre. And talking to people like Rick Hurd, the Chief Executive of Naylor Love, he's been going back to the Ministry of Education and saying, here's some of the things you need to do. I mean, this was a conversation I had with him in July last year. He'd been saying you need to standardise. You need to use standard designs and standard products rather than every school having its own bespoke design.
That's it for today. Thanks to our guests Belinda Johnston and Corey Busfield from Somerville School and Jonathan Milne from Newsroom. The Detail is funded through RNZ and NZ On Air. This episode was engineered by Mark Chesterman. It was produced by Alexia Russell and Gwen McClure. I'm Tom Kitchen. Mā te wā.